Google just quietly made their free AI tools so good that using them now costs you something way more valuable than money. I'm talking about their generative AI free tier, the stuff millions of people use every day without thinking twice. Gemini, NotebookLM, Imagen, all the free Google AI stuff you've probably played with. And here's the thing. They just changed the terms in a way that most people haven't noticed yet, but should absolutely care about. Let me break down what actually happened and why it matters more than you think. So first, the context. Google's always been the company that gives away free stuff to hook you. Free email, free search, free cloud storage. That's been their playbook for 20 years. The free tier isn't actually free. You're the product. Your data, your behavior, your patterns, that's what they're really collecting. We know this. It's how Google works. But what changed recently is the scope of what they're collecting from your AI interactions and how explicitly they're saying they'll use it. In their updated terms for free-tier AI products, Google now reserves the right to use your prompts, your inputs, your conversations with their AI models to train future versions of those models. That's not new on its surface. Tech companies have been doing this for years. But Google just made it way more explicit and way more aggressive. Here's the concrete part. If you use Gemini free, if you ask it to write code, brainstorm ideas, analyze documents, whatever, Google can now take that interaction and feed it directly into training their next model. Not anonymized, not abstracted, the actual content you gave them. Now, you might be thinking, okay, so what? I'm not putting anything secret in there. And maybe that's true for you. But think about who else is using these free tools. Developers testing code, students working on assignments, freelancers drafting client work, small business owners writing marketing copy, researchers exploring ideas. All of that is now explicitly fair game for Google to use to improve their models, which they then sell to enterprises. So you're not just using a free tool. You're working for Google. You're generating training data that makes their paid products better, which they then sell to companies and make billions on. And you get the free version in return. But here's where it gets actually dangerous. Because Google's free tier just became so capable that it's genuinely useful. Gemini can write complex code now. NotebookLM can analyze entire documents and generate insights. These aren't toy products anymore. They're real tools that real professionals are starting to rely on. Which means professionals are now feeding their actual work into Google's training pipeline without realizing it. A developer using Gemini free to debug a proprietary codebase? That code is now part of Google's training data. A consultant using Gemini to draft a strategy document for a client? That intellectual property is now part of Google's training data. A researcher using NotebookLM to analyze unpublished findings? Same thing. And here's the kicker. Google's terms say they can use this data to improve products they sell. So technically, a competitor could end up using a model trained partly on your proprietary work. Now, Google's lawyers would say that's not how it works, that they anonymize and abstract the data, blah, blah, blah. But the terms don't actually guarantee that. They just say they reserve the right to use it. And we've learned enough about how AI training works to know that anonymization isn't magic. It's not perfect. Researchers have shown you can sometimes reverse engineer training data from language models. So the real danger isn't that Google is evil or doing anything illegal. It's that the free tier has crossed a line from being a nice toy into being a productivity tool that people are now using for real work, without fully understanding the cost. The cost isn't money. The cost is your data, your intellectual property, your work product. And it's being siphoned into a machine that makes Google billions. There's also a second danger, which is more subtle. Google's incentive structure has changed. They now have a reason to make the free tier so good that people prefer it to the paid tier. Because the free tier is actually more valuable to Google, it generates training data at scale. The paid tier doesn't give them that same advantage. So expect the free tier to keep getting better and better, and expect the gap between free and paid to keep shrinking. Which sounds great for users, but it's actually a trap. Because eventually, when enough people are dependent on the free tier, when enough of their work is flowing through Google's training pipeline, Google can change the terms again. They can start limiting it, or they can start charging for it, or they can start using the trained models in ways that directly compete with your work. It's the long game, and it's working. So what should you actually do about this? Well, first, just be aware. Understand what you're trading when you use free AI tools. It's not free, You're paying with your data and your work. Second, if you're using these tools for anything proprietary, anything confidential, anything you wouldn't want to end up in a competitor's training data, don't use the free tier. Use the paid tier, or use a different tool entirely. Most paid AI tools have terms that explicitly protect your data from being used for training. Third, if you're building a product or a business, start thinking about this now. Don't build your workflow around free AI tools if you can't afford to have that workflow become part of Google's training data. It's not paranoia, it's just understanding how the economics actually work. And fourth, pay attention to the terms. Seriously, when Google or OpenAI or Anthropic or anyone else updates their terms, read them. This stuff matters. It matters more than most people realize. The free tier didn't get dangerous because Google did something new. It got dangerous because it got too good. It crossed the line from being a toy into being a tool, and nobody really noticed the moment that happened. So if you want to actually understand how AI is changing the world, not just the hype, but the actual incentives and the actual trade-offs, subscribe. I break down stuff like this all the time, the things that matter but nobody's talking about. New video every few days.